Welcome everybody to Volume 2 of the Phantom Files. I am Taylor Ruddle, I am your creepy chronicle curator, and your purveyor of paranormal parables. I'm dead excited to get back to episode 2 of the Phantom Files. It seems like you guys really enjoyed the first one. It was my most downloaded episode by a long margin, almost 3 times as downloaded as my other podcast episodes. So I'm going to take that as a good sign. You guys are here for the spooky stuff, and I could not be more delighted to learn this. Before I get into the stories, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to some of the people that have been helping me promote this podcast and finding stories for it. So the first would be Scott and Ryan from the Beyond the Shadows podcast. These guys have been super supportive of me. They've been giving me ways to promote the podcast. They've been playing my trailer on theirs. They've been introducing me to other podcasts. Really, really supportive guys. Go and check out their podcast. If you like the spooky stuff, then you'll probably like theirs too. Big thanks to Tracy from Ghosts and the Paranormal NZ. Tracy welcomed me super warmly into their community and helped share the episodes and helped put the call out for some more stories, and it resulted in probably some of the tales you're going to hear tonight. And then of course Mark from Haunted Auckland. They just have been really good as well at welcoming me into the community and sharing my episodes for all of you to listen to. I really appreciate it, and go and check out some of their pages. They do good work. Our first story tonight was submitted to me by a very good friend of mine, Hamish. It came up in conversation somewhere. I asked him if he had any paranormal experiences, and he told me the one that you're about to hear. So with that, take it away, Hamish.
Hi, my name's Hamish. I'm from Dunedin, but I now live up in Auckland. These are a couple of stories that happened to me. One when I was about 12, maybe 11, and the other one when I was in my mid-20s, so that was about 10 years ago. So the first one, when I was a kid, I was hanging out with a friend. We were over at his place. I think we'd been out, just roaming the neighbourhood, and we'd come back in for like a glass of water before heading back out and going for another run around. And we were standing in his kitchen, and he had next to his kitchen there was a door that led to the stairs down to the basement where his dad, I think, had model trains. And this door was normally closed, but while we were standing there having our drink, we just heard this sound like someone was running up the stairs, maybe like 2 stairs at a time, quite heavy thumping running. And it stopped at the door. So it wasn't like someone was coming running up the stairs and charging through the door. So the two of us kind of froze because we were expecting for someone to come running through the door with like an emergency or something, but no one ever emerged. Eventually we got the courage up to go and check the door and see if there was someone there, but no one. So that left us a bit freaked out, and I think we ended up just going back outside and trying to push it from our minds. And then the other story, when I was about 24, I was sitting watching a movie with someone in my flat. We lived on a second floor above a bar and an Indian restaurant. And my door was at the far end of the corridor, so when you came in basically downstairs, you opened the door and there was a stairway up, and then straight along the corridor was towards my bedroom on the left and my flatmate's bedroom on the right. I checked, there was no one else home, and we'd just finished watching this film, and again I just heard this thumping running, like someone with very heavy feet. I would almost say that it was like a 12-year-old, that kind of weight of footstep, but running full pelt from the top of the stairs along the corridor towards my door. And again, they stopped right outside my door, and there was nothing else. I sat there listening for a second, seeing if it was like one of my flatmates being a dick, like running, and then they were going to come into my room or they were going to go into their room, because we had very like rattly door handles. It was very obvious when someone had gotten home. but nothing. And I texted a couple of my flatmates. I went knocking on their doors, and no one else was there. So I still have no idea what it was. And it was, I started thinking about it, and the person that was with me didn't seem to notice it. But the thought was maybe it was someone downstairs thumping the ceiling or something, but it was too quick and too like rhythmic. It just, nothing quite added up. None of the explanations quite made sense. But yeah, I never knew quite what had happened there. So that one, those are two stories that have definitely stuck with me for a long time, and I'm not sure if I'd consider myself a believer or not, but make of that what you will. Alright, thanks Taylor, have a good one.
Thank you for submitting your story, Hamish. I always find that so strange how houses just like have thumps and bumps and, that whole expression of going bump in the night. Just recently, I myself was just about to fall asleep. I knew I was home alone. There's only me and my flatmate that live together, and I heard the distinct sound of what sounded like someone pushing a corner of the sofa into one of the walls. Logically, I assume maybe it had to have been me who kicked the wall and woke myself up again, or, I don't know, people always say the house is settling, whatever that means. I think the thing that would freak me out the most about your experience, Hamish, is the idea of it stopping just outside your door. The idea of something rushing up the stairs and then just being lurking on the other side of your door, it really sends shivers down my spine. I appreciate you submitting your story, Hamish, and hopefully it doesn't happen again. Our second tale for the night was submitted by Lois. I believe I found Lois on one of the Facebook community groups when I was asking for paranormal experiences. A little bit of a disclaimer, there is a bird in the background making a little bit of noise throughout this this story, so yeah, I couldn't remove it, so that's what it is in case you're wondering about the repetitive sound in the background there. So with that, let's hear Lois' story.
Hello, my name is Lois. I would like to share my very first experience at the age of 16. This happened in the early 1980s. My oldest brother was in the army at the time, and my mum and I went all the way to Wairuri and picked up his other two mates, and we brought them home for the weekend. I was sleeping in the living room at the time in a sleeping bag, and I just suddenly woke up. I didn't look at the time, and when I woke up, I saw this tall old man looking back at me. He was wearing a 1930s suit and a top hat. He had a beard, he looked grey looking, he had grey eyes. I absolutely just shit my pants, and I actually went back under the covers. And probably about half a minute later, I actually had the courage to look back out to see if he was still there, but he had gone. So yeah, I just thought I'll share my very first experience that I had at the age of 16. And this happened in Palmerston North.
Thank you, Lois, for submitting your story. Quite a short and sharp experience there, but just as creepy nonetheless. Something about the way she said that the old man had grey eyes really creeped me out. I also apologise if my voice sounds a little bit different or the audio changed a little bit. A little funny peek behind the curtain for your listening about the realities of podcasting. I was about halfway through Lois' story when the gas man knocked on the door very loudly. We've got a glass ranch slider on the side of our house, and that just about gave me a heart attack. You guys should have seen. You should have seen me jump when it happened. So if I'm a little weird, I do apologise. I'm just trying to get my heart rate to return to normal. Before we get into the third story, I'd just like to remind you that I'm always looking for stories to be submitted to the podcast. If you are a person living in New Zealand and you've got a paranormal experience that you'd like to get off your chest, please email it to me at ruddlesphantomfiles@gmail.com. I'll leave that in the show notes in the description so that you can find that easier. All you got to do is record it as a voice note and then email that to me and I'll handle the rest. So if you're enjoying the show and you want to help contribute to it, you can do a couple of things. You can encourage those people in your lives to share their stories with me. You can also go onto the iTunes podcast store thingy and give me a 5-star review. There were a few weeks when I think just due to the newness of my podcast, it was up there like number 30 in the New Zealand charts, but it has since rapidly fallen. I think we're sitting somewhere around our rock bottom at the moment. So yeah, if you want to help the podcast get some more visibility, share it with a friend, get your friends to share their stories with me, and leave me a review in the Apple Store. Our third story today is one of my own again. I've got a very small well of paranormal stories, and this is one of them. Take it away, me. Alright, I'm back with another story from my youth about something potentially paranormal. This story would have happened about 13 years ago. I would have been 17 or 18 years old, and I was working delivering pizzas in the Hornby area of Christchurch. Now, because of where the store was located, right on the edge of town at Hornby, that meant we would quite often get orders to these neighbouring suburbs called Prebbleton, Templeton, Lincoln, and Rolleston, which were not really in Christchurch. They were all at least about a 5-minute drive through what was essentially farmland or just empty, undeveloped land at the time. As of the time of this recording, a lot of it is a lot more developed. There are proper suburbs, and it feels very suburban in a lot of these areas, but back then it was just long, dark country roads. So back in these days, there wasn't many streetlights or anything like that. If you were lucky, the people you were delivering pizza to would leave a porch light on, but other than that, you basically just had to pick a driveway that seemed like it was the address you were taking the pizza to, and just hoping it was the correct one. Now, at the time, I'd just finished studying, and I wasn't working in the field that I studied, because I studied a degree in the arts, and I've always been a night owl, so at the time this job suited me pretty well. It was alright. I used to work quite late shifts, sometimes ending at around 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock at night. And this encounter happened after I just delivered a pizza to somewhere out in Prebbleton or Lincoln. I can't really remember the specifics of it. And I was driving back along one of the side roads. So there were no lights and big thick hedges on either side of the road with a small grass, like shoulder I guess, a little bit of grass on each side, but mainly it was just thick hedges on either side. And I was driving back, I was doing probably about 70 or 80. I'm usually a pretty cautious driver, and especially on a country road in the dark, I don't tend to go super fast. I was driving along, listening to probably the rock radio station or something, when something ran out in front of the car. I only got to see it for, 2 seconds, 5 seconds. It was running on all fours like a dog, and it was covered in long, shaggy hair. I don't know what the breed of the dog is, that classic sheepdog breed. Now, normally I would assume that this is just somebody's dog who's gotten off the property and gone running, but there was something about the proportions of this animal that seemed too lanky to be a dog. And it was like, you know how dogs, their back legs bend in that specific way? They bend back, whereas a human's legs the knees bend forward. I don't know if that makes sense, but that was the way this thing's knees bent. It honestly looked like a skinny human wearing like a ghillie suit. That was how floppy this shaggy hair was all over its body. Yeah, it looked like a human running on all fours, but not kind of awkward like a human does run on all fours. It looked like fast, and it looked like that's how it ran. And I only saw it for a few seconds as it ran across the road from one bunch of hedges into another. But there's this particular freeze frame in my head that's kind of burned into my brain, where I can kind of see it in slow motion or like a freeze frame, where all of the hairs are up in the air as it's been running, and it's illuminated by the headlights of my car. And yeah, just the posture looks so much more like a human rather than a dog. It was far enough ahead of my car that I wasn't in any danger of hitting it. I kind of just saw it run across ahead of the car, maybe like 5 or 6 meters, and it disappeared into the bushes on the other side. I got a hell of a fright, as you can imagine, and I definitely didn't stop to try and find out where this thing went. I think I even remember locking my car doors. I don't know what good that would do me, but I just remember doing that, and I just kept driving. To be honest, I haven't really told anyone about this story before. I think a part of my brain thinks that it was probably just a normal dog, but due to the night, and I was probably pretty tired working late at night, the weird lighting from my headlights and the fact that it was kind of running, I don't know, it could well have been just a regular dog that was running across the street, but my mind has warped it into something a lot creepier. I've been lucky to never see anything like that since. I don't deliver pizzas anymore, and I'm kind of glad, because that would really start to freak me out if I saw another one. Anyway, that's my story, and back to you, me. And we're back. That was my second, potentially paranormal, but I'm not really sure, experience. I find it so interesting how people that have had these potentially paranormal experiences, we almost tend to have like a freeze frame or a snapshot of the incident in our brain. Like I said in the story, if I close my eyes now, I can still really clearly see this still image of this dog-like creature in motion with all the hairs sticking up, fully illuminated by my headlights. The mind really is an interesting thing. So that brings us to the final story on tonight's episode. This story was submitted by Angela, I believe another person through one of the Facebook community pages. She submitted it in writing, and then I had a fellow comedian, Audrey Porne, actually record it for me. I think Audrey did a fantastic job of recording a really long story that didn't happen to her very coherently, so I really appreciate Audrey's time on that. And if you'd like to check out some of Audrey's comedy or the other things she's been a part of, you can check her out. I'll leave her social media links in the show notes for you. So with that, let's roll the final story for the evening. This is a long one, and it is absolutely terrifying. I hope you enjoy it.
Hi, I'm Angela, and this is my story. I was about 13 or 14 years old and lived on a quiet street in Rangiora with my mum, 3 sisters and brother. My older siblings were away one night, and it was just my mum, my younger sister and I at home. It was getting quite late, and my mum kept nagging at me to go to bed, but for some reason I really didn't want to go to sleep. Eventually I got the urge to go to bed, but I wanted to sleep in my sister's room instead. So I jumped into her bed, and I was almost asleep when I woke up to hear all of these voices. It sounded like I was in the pub on a Saturday night with all of the rugby boys after their game. My attention was drawn to the window, which was on the far side of the bedroom, and there stood this well-built, solid young teen standing in his dirty rugby uniform. He had curly hair and a dark blue and white striped rugby top on. I closed my eyes and my body froze. My heart started racing and jumping out of my chest. I closed my eyes for a few minutes, and when I opened them, the figure was standing halfway across the room. I tried to scream for help, but I had no voice. Nothing was coming out. I closed my eyes again, and by this stage I was really freaking out. My whole body was stiff, and I couldn't move, however my arms could, but the rest of my body felt like I was paralyzed. I opened my eyes again, and this time the figure was standing at the side of the bed. I tried screaming for my life, but still nothing was coming out. I quickly closed my eyes again, hoping he would disappear, and when I reopened them, he was leaning right over top of me. The voices in the background kept getting louder and louder and became very muffled. Somehow I managed to pull my blankets up over my head, and I lay there until the morning. I don't remember if I fell asleep after that, but I remember the night very clearly and how terrified I was. It felt like time had stopped, and it felt like time went by very slowly. This was just the first start of the visits from spirits. The next day, I told my mum about it, but she didn't believe me. She told me that that will teach me for sleeping in my sister's bedroom instead of my own. A few nights passed, and I got the same feeling again of not wanting to go to bed. I tried to stay up as long as I could, but Mum said that I had to go to bed and I had to go to sleep. I left the blinds open in my bedroom and I left my light on dim, and I tried to lie awake as long as I possibly could. Unfortunately, I slowly started to drift off to sleep, and my heart started to beat again really, really fast, like it was jumping out of my chest, just like last time. My bed was right up against the wall in the corner of my bedroom. It felt like I was awake but asleep at the same time. It kind of felt like I was in my own dream but still awake. Almost like that drunk feeling, like when you've had too much alcohol. This hand came out between the wall and my bed and up under the blankets in the middle of my bed. Once again, my body was frozen, I couldn't move, and I felt paralyzed. I tried to scream again, but no voice came out. The hand started squeezing my thigh really hard, and I couldn't do anything. It seems like it went on and on forever, but I really couldn't tell how long it had gone on for. In my mind, I was fighting as hard as I possibly could to get myself free so that I could move, but all I could manage was starting to make noises. And just like that, it was all over. I never got any sleep that night, and in the morning I told my mum, and she thought I had just made it all up again. She wanted to see where I had been grabbed on my thigh, so I showed her, and there right on my thigh were bruises where I had been grabbed, but Mum still doubted me. As the days passed after that evening, things were starting to happen around the house. Objects would fly out of the cupboards, or the fake flowers would shoot up out of the vase and land on the other side of the room. The peacock wall scroll that was on our kitchen wall would start to swing from side to side, and we would get hot boiling water coming out of our cold tap. I would occasionally see orbs racing across the walls like they were having a race with each other, and a horrible smell was always coming out of the room next to where my brother slept. I'd come home from school and that same feeling would wash over me again, the feeling of really not wanting to go to bed. I didn't even want to step foot inside our house. I'd have to force myself. Occasionally, I would hear a young girl crying out for her mother to come and help her. She would be crying out, help me, over and over again, and I wasn't sure where it was coming from. Growing up, I had an imaginary friend. Her name was Heckler, and she lived in my wardrobe. She had long blonde hair with a white ribbon in it. She was very pale, and she always wore a long nightie with lacy sleeves. To this day, I don't even know if she was real or just in my imagination. But for a period of time, our family rented out our house, and the girl that slept in the same room I had said she had seen a girl come out of the wardrobe looking exactly as I had described. Nights would pass with no activity, and I would start to believe that maybe things were settling down and getting better again. But then that dark feeling would come back, and I knew something bad was going to happen. Mum would tell me off and try to make me go to bed, and we would argue, and I would tell her that I can't go to bed because something was coming to get me. But Mum would always win the argument. I would reluctantly go to my bedroom, open the blinds, and leave the light on so I wasn't in complete darkness, and I would jump into bed. I tried so hard to stay awake, but I would always eventually lose that battle. One night, I woke up in a daze, and it felt like my entire bed had been lifted into the air and was being pushed towards the ceiling of my room. I remember feeling squished and once again not being able to move or yell or cry for help. A few nights after that happened, I knew they were coming to visit me again, I repeated my nightly routine of opening the blinds and turning the light on and getting into bed, but the light barely gave me any sense of comfort. That night, I woke up and my blankets were being pulled so tightly over my mouth and my nose, I felt like I couldn't breathe. I was paralyzed again, and I couldn't move to free myself from the sheets. By this stage, I was so scared of the dark, and I never wanted to be alone in the house. None of my sisters or brother ever noticed anything weird happening, so everyone thought I had been making it all up. Then the night came that I'll never forget, and to this day, it's still the scariest thing I've ever experienced. I was sitting up watching TV one night, and it was getting really late. I could feel myself growing tired, but I knew that if I went to sleep, I would get a visitor during the night. I tried desperately to stay awake, but I was so tired I knew I had to go to bed. I went to my room and left the light on dim, but the moon was glowing outside my window that night, lighting up the bedroom. I lied down on my stomach, but I almost always slept on my side or my back. I was so tired I quickly drifted off to sleep. All of a sudden, I woke up in a dreamy daze, and things didn't feel right. Everything felt fake. That's the best way I can describe the feeling. I was lying on my stomach, and my hands were both under the pillow, but I could feel something tightening around my neck. Something was trying to strangle me. Thankfully, this time I could move. My hands, which were under the pillow, were gripping on to a frozen, dead arm. I've never felt anything like it before. It was like holding a dead arm that had pins and needles and had been frozen in the freezer. I could feel it was rock solid on the inside, and then it had this layer of frozen softness on the outside. I tried to pull the hand off from around my neck, but I didn't have the strength. Every time I pulled backwards, the arm would keep getting longer and longer, like it kept growing. I ended up arching my back as far as I could, but the arm just kept coming out from underneath my pillow. It seemed like I had been fighting this demon or whatever it was for hours and for most of the night. I couldn't speak at all or make any noise while this was happening, but I remember thrashing around in my bed, desperately trying to get myself free. The arm eventually retracted and disappeared back under my pillow and down between my mattress and the wall. It was finally daylight. I got out of bed and went to see my mum straight away. I told her what happened, and this time she believed me, because there were marks and bruises all over my neck from whatever had tried to strangle me that night. Mum decided it was finally time to bring a friend of the family in and try to get rid of whatever was in our house. The friend said there are 5 spirits in our house. 2 of them were good. 1, he didn't know if it was good or bad. 1 was bad, but the one that had attacked me was evil, very evil. Since then, I've had quite a few encounters with spirits, mainly past family members, but I can pick up on different energies when I go to places as well. I hear voices that pop into my ear if I ever need guidance or I need to know something. I'll never forget what happened and what I went through, and it makes my skin crawl every time I think about those nights. What I went through, I hope I never have to experience again. I was scared of the dark for a very, very long time.
And we are back, and I don't even know what to say after hearing that story. What can you say, really? I suppose, first of all, I should just say thank you, Angela, for submitting your story. That sounds like it was really terrifying, and I hope nothing like that has happened to you since. And thanks again to Audrey for doing such a good job recording that story. I bet that was an interesting experience for Angela, hearing her story told by somebody else. I hope you enjoyed it. The start of the story where Angela said that she could hear, it was almost like she was in a full pub full of noise, is a really interesting one. I've read about some experiences where people had a similar feeling right before or during a ghost encounter. And then the start where the rugby player appeared in her room. Like, I hope this isn't callous for me joking about this, but I think maybe there's a lot of people out there who would actually quite enjoy a really fit rugby player appearing in their room at night. That's all I'm saying. But then that story did turn dark and scary really quickly. I'll reveal a little bit about myself here. That is basically one of my biggest fears throughout my whole life, was the idea of being grabbed or touched by, something, monsters, demons, whatever it is, while I was under the covers. And the fact that a hand came out from between the bed and the wall is something that would have absolutely terrified me as a little child for many, many years. I actually had to sleep with my bed up against a wall because I suppose it felt the safest. It felt like I had my back to a wall. So as I was listening to that story, I just thought to myself, oh no, that's supposed to be safe. I also find it really interesting in such a vivid description that Angela can still remember of what this arm felt like. The fact that she said it was rock hard in the center, but with a squishy sort of frozen layer on the top, I suppose. That's just exactly what it feels like when you're kind of working with or moving around frozen meat. And I could just picture that perfectly in my head as I was reading and listening to the story. And then the fact that she had marks on her after all of these incidents is really scary. The whole imagery of that story, to be honest, was quite a freaky one. I just was picturing in my head this long blue sort of frozen arm snaking its way around the bed, around her throat, I think she said in the story. Just really, really creepy stuff. And with that, we are at the end of Volume 2 of the Phantom Files. I hope you've enjoyed listening along with me. I really enjoy putting these episodes together, and based on the amount of listeners we've got, it looks like I'm going to be continuing these for a very long time. I have enough stories for another 1, possibly 2 episodes, but as always, I'm always looking for stories, so don't forget to submit them to me at ruddlesphantomphiles@gmail.com. I've got a few comedians who are keen to step in and do some voice recording, so if you don't feel comfortable recording your voice in your voice, you can send it to me, same email, send it to me as write it up, send it as a story, and I will have somebody voice record it and we'll play it on the show. As always, you can find me on all the social medias at Taylor Ruddle Comedy. I am on Twitter now, which is just at Taylor Ruddle. Really appreciate you tuning in. I'm hoping it won't be too long before the next one, hopefully just a couple of weeks to a month, depending on how long it takes me to put it together. So with that, I'm going to end the show. Stay safe, and until next time.